Thank you for that introduction, Ridwan. And it's a great pleasure for me to be here this afternoon, colleagues, and to join you from sunny South Africa. So the Digital Council Africa, just by way of introduction, is an industry association that was established now almost 12 years ago. It's an independent, not-for-profit organization, and we seek dialogue with stakeholders to discuss how to maximize the societal benefits of digital and data-driven technologies. And our aim is to increase equality, inclusivity, well-being, and digital adoption. The Digital Council, or the DCA as it's known, believes that the development and deployment of digital access will enhance the quality of life of all African citizens. And it will help Africa to enlarge its digital footprint, increase its effectiveness and competitiveness within the global marketplace. Our charter is to educate Africa governments, policymakers, and political leaders on how we can bring connectivity to all the people of South Africa. I think we'll agree that the digital economy, especially today, is essential to meet the requirements of this new post-COVID digital world. And today it is widely accepted that the digital economy has the potential to create jobs, it alleviates poverty, and of course it enhances a region's competitiveness through digital transformation. And it plays an overarching role over all the sectors of the economy, from healthcare and education to agriculture and trade and fintech, just to name a few. However, it goes without saying that a digital economy requires a modern and robust digital infrastructure, one that is inclusive and that reaches all people to allow for equal access and participation in this digital economy. To date, it's been well accepted that Africa's digital infrastructure developments have been relatively slow in comparison to some of the developed countries. And given this historic deficit, the gap between sub-Saharan Africa and South Africa and the developed economies have always required attention. And while Africa's infrastructure challenges is not a new one, what may be new is the rapidly changing policy, regulatory, and fiscal environment that are currently undergoing an immense overhaul. And we're really excited about these developments, particularly in South Africa. Now, the pandemic has been a terrible event across the globe. But one of the greatest spin-offs of this this pandemic has been the this positive development of the great focus that is suddenly being given to the digital economy. These positive developments has meant that ICT services has been one of the most dynamic and resilient sectors on the continent, and not only surviving the pandemic, but also enabling other sectors to survive the catastrophic impacts of the pandemic. It's also one of the leading sectors that attract foreign direct investment to international investors and development institutions who are looking to unlock value by bridging the digital divide, expanding connectivity, and enabling innovative service models. As a result, there's a renewed wave of investments in Africa by hyperscalers, infrastructure operators, and investors alike for digital infrastructure assets ranging from enormous submarine cables such as the Equano and to Africa, to new data centers and towers. But we'll touch on that in a couple of minutes. Especially noteworthy is the increased levels of infrastructure sharing initiatives by network operators as their business models and focus continue to shift from traditional communication services, such as we know it, voice, data, and messaging, to become providers of a wide range of digital lifestyle services. And we know this, they're moving into financial services, insurance, banking, entertainment, IT, and there's too many actually to mention. Existing infrastructure operators have not only continued to expand their footprint, but they've also diversified asset class to new infrastructure. But we're going to touch on that in a moment. So, so on that note, let's take a closer look at South Africa in particular and how we sort of relate and compare to the rest of the world. So when it comes to mobile connectivity, it still remains the leading method of connectivity for most of the population. And it is the most widely adopted, of course, in South Africa as well. And currently, there's just short of about 34,000 towers in South Africa. South Africa, and in fact, Sub-Saharan Africa, is still fairly behind the global average of 55% at 55% mobile internet penetration. Globally unique mobile subscriptions have reached 67% penetration at the end of 2020. And adding new subscribers is increasingly difficult as markets are becoming saturated and the economics of reaching rural populations are incrementally challenging. Nevertheless, South Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa in general is expected to add 120 million new subscribers by 2025, only second to the Asia-Pacific region, with a major portion of these connections going to South Africa. International trends also show us that telcos are increasingly moving towards asset-light models. MNOs are monetizing their infrastructure assets through carve-outs into separate entities as a first step and to sale or listing as the second step. Locally, tower sales and leaseback agreements date back more than a decade, so nothing new. However, outsourcing of the remaining few valuable tower portfolios by the MNOs are expected to take place in the coming few years. In addition, asset monetization strategies by telco also started to gain momentum. One of the more well-known names are a company like MTN, which is the largest operator in Africa. They've got approximately 280 million subscribers in 21 countries, have also begun the process to outsource its tower portfolio in South Africa, with IHS winning that business. The MTN Group has also announced a new 4-year strategic plan, which they call Ambition 2025. This will see the carrier focusing only on regional Africa dominance and exiting other markets, but also spinning off other assets such as their fiber, financial services into standalone units. Now, when it comes to submarine cables, of course, we can't overstate the importance of good submarine and global and international access to cable systems. And globally, the market of fiber optic submarine cable systems was valued at about $23.4 billion in 2020. And this is forecasted to reach about $37.8 billion by 2027. And the expected growth is at a compound annual rate of 7.1% between 2020 and 2027. The submarine cables are, of course, the backbone of digital infrastructure and carries approximately 90% of data traffic across the world. The rising demand for data, especially since the onset of the pandemic, is one of the key factors driving investment by OTTs to increase the supply of internet through the submarine cable market. Key players of the submarine cable market globally are well-known names: Google, Facebook, AWS, or Amazon, and Microsoft. More closer to home, Google is increasing its footprint in the submarine cable space to guarantee quality access to its current and future services. Equiano is Google's third private cable, and it will be owned and operated solely by Google with a consortium of investors. The cable will incorporate optical switching at a fiber pair level, rather than the traditional approach of wavelength level switching. Using optical switch simplifies the allocation of cable capacity, giving Google the flexibility to add and reallocate it in different locations as and when needed. The first phase of the project, which will include connecting South Africa with Portugal, with a stop and a drop-off in Nigeria, is forecasted to be finished at the end of 2021, so not long from now. So the cable was first launched in May 2020, I'm talking about Facebook's to Africa subsea cable, and it will now connect 33 countries in Africa, Europe, Middle East, and Asia. The expansion plan will add the new Pearl section of the To Africa project, and it'll include linking India, Pakistan, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia into the project, improving connectivity into more regions. This extension will bring the total length of the To Africa cable system to more than 45,000 kilometers, making it the longest subsea cable system ever deployed. The To Africa cable alone, with a massive potential capacity of over 180 terabytes per second over 16 fiber pairs, will double the total internet capacity on the continent once completed, envisaged for 2024. The members of the consortium include China Mobile, Facebook, MTN, Orange, STC, Telecom Egypt, Vodafone, and WIOCC. South Africa, a country that is not short of submarine cables, currently have 7 submarine cables with a total design capacity exceeding 70 terabytes per second. That was in 2021. ACE on the West Coast and METIS on the East Coast began operation in 2021, adding a total capacity of 37 terabits per second. Equiano and To Africa cable systems are expected to be completed between 2021 and 2023 and will literally dwarf existing cable systems in Africa with a total of 300 terabits per second additional capacity. The arrival of these new high-capacity cable systems are likely to further decrease international connectivity cost, and combined with the increase of local data centers, hence more data being processed and stored locally. Some older cables might be impacted commercially, but of course, these new cables are very good news for Africa. From a satellite connectivity point of view, SpaceX's Starlink satellite service that's already got over 1,400 satellites orbiting the Earth is expected to be available in South Africa by 2022, and according to them, at very competitive prices. The problem with this is that it first has to secure an individual electronic communications network, IECNS license, and an individual electronic communication services license from the regulator in South Africa. And as fiber to the home deployments expand their reach to underserviced and rural areas, and fixed wireless pricing has been dropping considerably in the last year, the Starlink service might face some tough competition when it finally arrives here. Operators of broadband networks on high throughput geo satellites in South Africa include companies like Yasat, Avanti, Connect, Eutelsat, and Intelsat Flex. Liquid Telecom also operates their own managed network on a number of satellites. So when we look at data infrastructure on the continent, South Africa currently ranks number 25 on Cloud Scene based on data center density. African vendor-neutral data center and interconnection services provider Terraco Data Center Environments completed its JB3 data center facility, which is located in Isando, in Ekurhuleni, in Johannesburg, South Africa. And JB3 comprises of 45,000 square meters of building structure, 12,000 square meters of data hall space, 29 megawatts of critical power load. And when combined with the existing Isando campus facility, the critical power load totals 40 megawatts across the campus data center footprint, with capacity to be even expanded further. The company broke ground on its 50,000 square meter JB4 facility in November 2020, and when completed in Q1 of 2022, the center will be the largest single-site data center on the African continent, taking Terraco's capacity to over 110 megawatts. Aside from JB4, the company operates the Isando campus, JB1, JB3, the Rondebosch facility, Cape Town, Brackenfell, Cape Town, and Durban facilities. Now, separately, NTT Limited, which is a world-leading global technology services provider, and Dimension Data, the South African systems integrator and managed services provider, which represents the NTT business in Middle East and Africa, announced that construction work for their Johannesburg 1 data center has commenced during late 2020. The data center design is based on a Tier 3 standards and will be constructed in 2 phases. When fully built, it will deliver a total of 6,000 square meters of IT space and 12 megawatts of IT load. The first phase of the site is scheduled to become operational in the beginning of 2022. In May 2020, Africa Data Centers, which is part of the Liquid Telecoms group, completed the acquisition of a state-of-the-art Tier 4 data center in Johannesburg, which they acquired from Standard Bank. Liquid Telecom also announced its Africa Data Center expansion plan in South Africa and other countries in Africa with a $300 million investment, which is earmarked to support this expansion. AWS in Cape Town, the AWS region in Cape Town was launched in 2020, as well as other major cloud players, including Microsoft Azure, Oracle, and Huawei, all launching their cloud strategies in the country in the last couple of years. And then, of course, one of the latest advance or announcements everybody will know is the Vantage data center, which was announced in mid-2021. Vantage is a leading global provider of hyperscale data center campuses, and they announced that it's begun construction of its first Africa campus in Johannesburg, South Africa. And this totals an investment of $1 billion from their existing financial partners. It's an 80 megawatt campus, which will be built in Johannesburg's Waterfall City region. So moving on a little bit, looking at the fixed access connectivity in South Africa. In most markets, in fact, we know that globally, fiber broadband services to a large extent remains a niche service focused on main cities and urban areas. Now we know that, of course, other than in the UAE, where there's mass proliferation of fiber services, and I think the UAE has achieved 100% coverage, or at least close to 100% coverage in their markets. For the rest of the world, there's always the concerns around connectivity for the urban areas and underserviced areas. But in South Africa, particularly, the overall household penetration of fiber-based broadband services reached only approximately 2%. And South Africa being one of the leading markets when it comes to fiber deployment. South Africa is the only country in sub-Saharan Africa that have exceeded 1 million fiber broadband subscribers in 2021. As fiber broadband evolved, the cost of last mile fiber, we're seeing that that's coming down, and it's dropped significantly. And in many cases, thanks to a mature technology, cheaper deployment methodologies that are adopted, methodologies such as aerial and wall pinning, and aerial fiber deployments are being adopted as the preferred method of rollout, specifically in South Africa, and not only for last mile connectivity, but also for national broadband projects. The drop of fiber deployment costs is playing a massive enabling factor, which is allowing operators to deploy fiber into lower income areas, to more rural areas, from traditional urban areas, and to look at how they can connect secondary cities and underserviced areas. And this is like going after the markets where previously the business case did not necessarily stack up. But there's been growing focus by government as well as the regulator to encourage further infrastructure sharing, to remove barriers to entry that slows down the deployment of infrastructure. And there's several initiatives ranging from infrastructure sharing regulations, unified way-leave systems, rapid deployment policies, all coming together and working together to enable the sector and to expand fiber optic infrastructure deployment to all areas and all people in South Africa. At the highest level in the country, there's a significant effort by what is in the presidency known as Operation Vulindlela to create an enabling environment which seeks to bring connectivity, a ubiquitous connectivity to South Africans. One of the notable projects that have been announced recently by Treasury is the approval of a Broadband Access Fund. And the first phase of that is a proof of concept, which will consider ways in which lower income households can be connected to high-speed broadband through grants or incentives to operators to help them reach these communities. And of course, these efforts are also further encouraging investment strategies as investors are readying themselves to capitalize on this, this stabilizing regulatory environment. So there's also an immense amount of fiber that have been deployed at national level, or in South Africa, we refer to it as our backhaul connectivity. And the fiber footprint continues to grow as the infrastructure rollout expands to more locations, reaching underserviced cities, suburbs, and smaller outlying towns. And several companies there are notable companies are making inroads and are chasing towns. Telkom, Vodacom, Liquid, Vumatel, Broadband, Infraco, Dark Fiber Africa, Metro Fiber Network, Frog Food, to just name a few. So CIVH Vumatel has also shown significant increase. They've grown from 8 to 18,000 kilometers, and MTN showing significant growth, and Metro Fiber Network almost in the last year almost doubled its network capacity. There's also some government-led open access networks projects at Metro, provincial and national projects, and there was obviously everybody will know that there's a spectrum auction which is expected to be completed by March 2022. Much debated spectrum conversation, which hopefully will come to an end and see high demand spectrum allocated to operators in early 22, which will naturally enable the sector even more. In closing, just some of the fixed broadband market trends. The total number of broadband connections in South Africa has just gone past a million, 1.162 million subscribers or adoptions. We can see that in line with the phased out plan of OpenServe, the gradual shutdown of ADS lines in a variety of areas around the country has resulted in the decline of the DSL subscriptions. And of course, remote working, studying from home, online lifestyle habits as a result of the pandemic has fueled the fiber to the home service adoption, resulting in a significant growth in FTTX subscription. Currently, incredible demand for fiber related services. And fiber deployments will continue to expand into underserviced areas, medium and outlying towns, but still immense opportunity for investment and capacity building in this area. And then, of course, traditional unlicensed fixed wireless access connections were approximately 270,000 in 2021. What was notable about this is that this didn't have a notable change or significant change year over year. Well, just by way of concluding, South Africa has a population of 58 million people. There's 33,000 towers, of which 13,000 belonged to MTN, which have now been moved over to IHS. Vodacom have got approximately 9,000 towers. They are carving those towers out and putting them into its own entity. Gyro Group has got 6,500 towers. American Tower Corporation, 2,830. One Towers and SBA Communications, 1,095, Cell C 700, and Centec 240. Yeah, I think at that stage, I'm going to hand back to you. Thank you very much for this opportunity to present some information on the South African market and the landscape, the digital landscape. It's a pleasure to be with you here this afternoon, and yeah, please feel free to reach out to me for more information. Back to you, Ridwan.